This topic resonates with many of us here, especially in tech. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, we all faced moments of uncertainty and self-doubt. We have two amazing panelists, Steven and Chase. They will share their unique career path and their experiences with us to how to tackle the imposter syndrome. So let's start, and hopefully we all live feeling a little bit empowered. And a quick introduction, I'm Guligena Aierken. I'm an iOS developer at JPMorganChase. I also graduated from Flatiron School. And before pivoting into software engineering, I was a German-Chinese interpreter at Volkswagen in China, and where I translate between two languages. And though now I mostly translate between programming languages. So I call myself multi-human lingual and multi-programming lingual. And outside of work, I juggle mentoring first-generation college students in New York City. Jose and Shosan, they're here today. And I'm also parenting my twin daughters on autism spectrum, making me a real pro handling bugs of all kinds, not only in code and in life as well. And we have two incredible panelists. One, Steven, you must have already listened to the amazing AI prompting speech about. He mentioned about UpskillHero as well. That's a great application. And Steven is the multifaceted full-stack software engineer, product manager, and educator who has made a mark across diverse fields, from AI and game design to fintech and social networking. His journey has taken him from leading software teams to developing innovative educational tools and authoring a sci-fi novel that teaches coding. You must have seen that. And Steven's current work at UpskillHero involves crafting interactive experiences that blend self-discovery with technology, helping thousands of users unlock new skills. We are excited to hear Steven's insights on how to overcome imposter syndrome and how to approach confidence and growth. Joining us is Chase Rabenn, a dynamic software engineer at JPMorganChase like me, and where he works on cutting-edge voice and call technology that powers customer service interactions. Chase's journey into tech began with a leap into software engineering at Flatiron School, where he quickly found the value of community and mentorship. As a coach at Flatiron, he championed collaboration and guided students through the challenges of bootcamp life. His career has since flourished at JPMorganChase, where he contributes to large-scale enterprise platforms and remains committed to creating inclusive spaces. Outside of work, Chase enjoys quality time with his fiancée and their dog, Teddy. Now I'll hand it over to you guys to say a quick hello. Steven, you want to begin?
Excited to be here. I hope some of you caught my speech before a few hours ago. And I've had a little bit of time to think about this panel about imposter syndrome, because software engineering is a unique field where that feeling tends to emerge probably more often than other career paths. So happy to give a raw take on it today.
Hey everyone, I'm happy to be here. Thank you everyone, Flatiron, and thank you for all the organizers. I think I realized for the first time how bad I had imposter syndrome when I was a student at Flatiron. I then realized, oh, I've had it for my entire life in different areas. I think it is, it's so pervasive. I'm sure in all industries, but speaking specifically about technology and overcoming it, or at least just seeing it for what it is, can be really powerful in your life and your career.
Thank you for the introduction. I actually made a Mentimeter poll, but due to the technical glitch, we might not be able to see it on the screen. But everyone can go into menti.com and use the code 24619562 to take a quick poll. It's right, it's 24619526. It's a very simple question about what is imposter syndrome. So basically, it will help set the stage for our conversation, and we can see how common imposter syndrome is. So I'm going to give you a moment to look quickly. The code is 24619526. Yes, it's supposed to be showing, but because of the technical issue, I cannot see that right now. Let me try real fast. Yes. Now I don't have the control over the. Can I see it? Can you make it? Thank you so
Definitely
much.
the second one.
Present is on the corner over there. It's presenting in another screen? Okay. Yes, this is the right one. I hope everybody can join that. I don't know if it's, now the code changed, I'm sorry, the code changed to 1635064. Okay, let's not make it to block us, hopefully. So let's read it out loud. A psychological pattern where individuals doubt their accomplishments and have a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud. I bet most of us have that feeling no matter what you do. I want to explore this a bit further because imposter syndrome can manifest in many different forms and many different signs and behaviors. So my first question to the panelists are, what are some common signs or behaviors that indicate someone might be experiencing imposter syndrome? Chase, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I was talking to my coworkers about this panel, and one of my coworkers, Valentina, she said, well, what's imposter syndrome? I've never heard of that. I said, well, it's this feeling that, you're almost chosen by mistake. You're not supposed to be there and you're going to be outed. She said, oh, I don't have that. I don't have that. I'm like, oh, well, a lot of people have that and they feel like everyone around them is smarter. And she says, everyone around here is smarter than me. And it's a good example of how it can really, even as we're giving this talk, there's going to be a lot of you in the audience who are like, that's not me. You don't understand. I really don't belong in my class or my job. I really am a fish out of water. And I think it's just this feeling of not believing the truth, which is you are exactly where you should be. When I was a coach at Flatiron, I had students that felt like maybe they were out of their depth, and I had to remind them, you're not here by mistake. You took the exact same entrance that every single person did. You've taken all the tests, all the challenges. You're exactly where you deserve to be. You fought to be here. And when you have that part of your brain that says, I don't deserve to be here, I got here by mistake, I tricked them, they must have thought it was another Chase Rabenn, that thought, that irrational thought, well, that is imposter syndrome. It's very difficult to notice in yourself, though. But that's what it feels like in retrospect.
Yes, Stephen, do you have?
Yeah, I agree with everything that he's saying. For me, I do have a more robust because I was thinking about this because I was on the panel of what actually causes imposter syndrome, so I do want to talk more about that. But to answer this question in terms of how do you know that you have it, well, I think it's self-talk. It's what are the thoughts going through your mind? If you start a new job or you're in a new career, or even working on another project, what are you telling yourself? You can notice pretty quickly, are you saying this is awesome, I'm really getting this, I'm energized, I'm building things, I'm making things happen, I can't wait to take the next step with my project? Or are you saying things that do happen pretty often, I'm not really sure what I'm doing, I'm frustrated, do I even belong here? Does that person think my pull request is stupid? Did I not think through something clearly enough? Did I make a mistake? That kind of rambling in your mind is indicative that you have some type of imposter syndrome. And I think we all feel it in different parts of life, but I'm sure it'll be a next question, what it is. I mean, I do think software engineering is disproportionately set up to cause imposter syndrome. So I would like to talk a little more about that in the panel.
Indeed, we have that question. So imposter syndrome often gives us negative kind of feeling, but do you think we can use imposter syndrome to have positive impact?
I do not. I think that challenges are good. Having a feeling that you're looking at a task and thinking, oh wow, this is gonna take a lot. But that's not imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is not looking at a task and assessing like, oh my God, it's huge. Like, wow, this is gonna take a lot of work. That's not. It's looking at being like, I will never be able to do this and I shouldn't even try. So I think that I don't think it's necessary. I haven't seen the thing is it's not really avoidable in many ways. And the best, like I said, one of the only things you can really do of it is, the only good thing that can come out of it is once you start to recognize it, and then you can move on from it. But the feeling itself, I don't see any benefit to.
So it does serve as a positive force for you to get better when you have the imposter syndrome, to be like, okay, let's use that to make myself better.
Maybe as a challenge, but I wouldn't call it, there's challenges that are good things. It's a good challenge, and we learn from challenges. We get stronger from challenges. Imposter syndrome is, to me, the thing that prevents us from even starting to overcome the challenge. So it's before we overcome it. It's good in retrospect. It's not good in the moment.
Thank you for that insight. What do you think, Stephen?
So I've been doing software engineering and engineering for quite a while now. I mean, if you add up all the years, like 10 years, and you always feel that feeling. And I think that the reason for it is that in the world of software, the amount of knowledge that you have to pick up on a day-to-day or even an hour-to-hour basis is exponentially larger than any field. And I'm very opinionated. You may have already seen this in my previous talk. I sometimes make fun of my investment banking friend. He has very hard hours. I'm like, dude, you don't have to do what I have to do. You don't have to learn 30 things a day. And learning is fun, but there's a lot of intimidation for just how much breadth you need on a knowledge basis. So in terms of, there's a positive and a negative side with imposter syndrome, but I think the better way to view it is that some of it's real and some of it isn't real. So the easier thing to interpret, but probably the harder thing to get over, is the side that's just your own fear. You're just kind of insecure. You're not able to kind of pump yourself up and say, come on, I can do this. Nobody here is smarter than me. Maybe you have a little less experience, but you've got to have positive self-talk or you're never going to succeed in anything. So that's easier to understand, I guess, or kind of wrap your head around. What I have noticed, and again, I've been very introspective about this because I'm doing this panel. I'm also started a new contract job recently. And there's something that I think is really important to recognize is that in software, you have vertical depth, meaning you're like a full stack engineer and you can build, like for me in my early software career, I was really good at going end to end, building a database, building an API, building a mobile social networking application. And you run into so many nuances on that. After a few years, I became very senior at building like a social networking oriented full stack app. But you can't kid yourself on how much horizontal breadth is needed in terms of knowledge in software engineering. Like something in the back of my head, like when I joined a bigger company a couple of years ago, I had never really played around with deployment and Docker. I kind of lied to myself that I knew everything to some extent. And I walked in there and the lead developer was talking about Docker with me. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. I didn't know what I was talking about, and I knew I didn't know what I was talking about. And part of that, I don't want to say it's blame, but if you want to prepare yourself for this field, and it's probably relevant to other fields, you've got to be pushing yourself on the side to get that horizontal depth. If you don't know how to use AWS, go start a project tonight and teach yourself and push yourself. If you don't know AI or you don't know machine learning or linear algebra, there's so many fields that you're going to face. And to me, it's very obvious. Like trying to give a very clear example, because I told you I started a new gig recently. They're using, I consider myself a senior engineer, but they're using just very sophisticated object-oriented programming, right? It's not like Code Academy teaching you object-oriented programming. It's like dense, multi-layered. The file is like 50 pages long. I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't belong here. You say that quickly to yourself. You're like, no, calm down. You do know what you're doing. Maybe they didn't onboard you perfectly, which is also another thing. You got to figure out how to teach yourself quickly in environments that aren't perfectly, I don't want to talk too long, sorry, but you need to make sure you have horizontal breadth, and you got to push yourself because you'll feel way more equipped. And last thing I'll say is sometimes the imposter syndrome, it is real. You got to teach yourself more, and you got to push yourself.
Thank you for sharing that, Stephen, and thank you for leading us to the next segment, actually, why it occurs in tech so often because of the fast-paced knowledge learning and the constant needs to adapt to the new changes. And Chase, do you think you have the similar experience, and why do you think it happens so often in tech?
Yeah, it happens. Tech is changing so rapidly. And every week, one of your friends is going to text you and say, oh, this is the new technology. Forget about JavaScript. This is the one you got to learn, or whatever it is. This is the new package. And it can be overwhelming because you will constantly feel like, well, if I don't learn this, I'm going to be left behind. The reality is, it is changing so rapidly. One of the ways you can best equip yourself is to just keep building on what you know and find adjacent knowledge. I mean, I think that you're not going to learn, accepting you're not going to learn everything. You find the thing that you have proficiency in and that you enjoy and is sustainable for your life and your career, and build on that is something I would say. But no matter how long you're going to be in this industry, you could be in for 10, 20, 30 years, there's still going to be new technologies coming around the corner, and you have to keep yourself relevant. So I think that's why imposter syndrome can really sneak up at you at any moment in this industry, especially because you have a lot of people who are very excited about all these new technologies. And you'll have a friend, or you have an acquaintance, or a colleague, or maybe your product manager says, let's get this integrated into the software. And you want to make sure that you stay ahead of it, and if you don't, you're going to get left behind. I think that, again, can be truth to it. You do need to keep yourself relevant, but you do also need to accept that you're not going to be able to learn everything. And you don't want to veer too far off from, unless they're going to completely do rebuild and a new stack, you don't want to give up what you are already proficient and strong in.
Appreciate that. So speaking of keeping yourself relevant, how do you deal with the pressure of staying current when things go so quickly, and do you have strategic practical ways to keep yourself up to date with all the technologies? Stephen, do you want to go first?
In terms of staying relevant, just thinking kind of what I was thinking about what Chase was saying. I mean, I think this is all connected. Everybody's facing the same battle of how much time do you have in the day, and it's very stressful when you're working on one project and you're like, oh my God, I need to learn something new. I'm also the founder of a microlearning app where we're trying to figure out how to get learning as a part of almost a pleasurable part of your day. I think what I really wanted to share, again, I think it's all related, is that I think there's two types of engineers in terms of just leaving the audience with something that I think is a unique take. There are these developers that I call OG developers. They're my first business partner. They're these people that have been coding since they're 5 years old. My previous business partner, his dad taught him database engineering when he was 5. There's a certain tiny crop of engineers that are just going to speak this language at a different pace than anyone else is ever going to, and that's fine. It's their responsibility to teach the more junior people. But everybody else is going through the same thing as you. This is such an important point. Most people aren't going to share or talk out loud about imposter syndrome, but I was actually at a meetup here a couple of weeks ago where this very senior AI engineer at Google or somewhere really impressive, every bit of pain I was feeling, he was feeling the exact same thing. There's too much knowledge coming at me. I don't know if I'm learning everything quickly. The point is, when you're in this job, and maybe whatever the job evolves into in the future, everyone's going through the same thing as you, except maybe those like 1 out of a million developers who just had a weird life story and getting that knowledge. And you just need to be okay with that and try to carve out some time in your week to learn new skills. And that's hard to do because that means creating a new habit. But you have to do that. You have to set aside an hour or two a day to just learn something different.
What do you think, Chase? Do you have other
Yeah,
advice?
I agree. I mean, one thing to add to that, I mean, I think one of the hard, and that's why UpskillHero is amazing, but it's one thing about that's difficult is someone will come to you and say, you have to learn this technology. And then you sit down, you're like, I don't have a connection to this. I'm not really interested in it. I just have this little bit of fear that makes me think if I don't learn it, I'm gonna get left behind. So I think for me, I have to trick myself into learning sometimes, and I usually just realize the best way to do it is to find something I'm interested in learning that day or that period. I mean, I like to follow courses on Udemy, for instance, but you'll find your way to the relevant technologies through your own enthusiasm and interest. So start with what you are naturally just curious about, what you want to learn more about, and I guarantee you it will somehow connect to those more relevant technologies. But even like, again, my thing is Python right now. I'm trying to do a course on it. Of course that's relevant, and of course that's going to lead to more and more technologies. But no matter where you start, it's just getting in the habit of coding something regularly, something. And then it becomes easier to jump over when someone says, you should try this technology. But when you just go from the standpoint of, you have to learn this, fear is not a good way to learn. It's a good way to put your head down and do work for all night. It's not the best way to learn.
Thank you for sharing that, how to keep yourself up with all the new technology. To circle back to the overcoming imposter syndrome, so do you two have practical strategies to overcome it when it occurs? Chase, do you want to start?
I think one of the most important parts of this is, and I learned this about myself in Flatiron School. I used to be, you were talking about the OG developers, and there's going to be people around you that seem to just pick things up so quickly. One of my classmates, and now my close friends, this guy Steve, his method for learning is after a lecture, he just regurgitates everything he heard. He doesn't understand it necessarily, but that's his method. He just says it. So if you're around him, and I would think, oh my God, Steve is a master of this already. How did this happen? We just finished the lecture. No, that's just his method. Now, meanwhile, I was keeping quiet and just my imposter syndrome was compounding. So it took me time to realize how I learn may not be cool or it may be embarrassing, which is I need to do really tedious repetition for like the first 48 hours learning something to get past the syntax block. And I mean literally, I had to rewrite a fetch request, handwritten, for like hours and hours in a row when I was learning JavaScript just to get past that block. It's not cool, but I had to accept it and be proud of it because I got past it. And I think the other part of this is imposter syndrome lives in silence and darkness. You suffer in silence. And one of the number one, the easiest way to just start to open up, ask for help. It's very difficult, easier said than done, because it shows that you don't know it as well as you want to pretend you do. But you ask for help, you not only help yourself, but you're going to help those around you because you start to change the culture of your team, your group, into a place that it's okay to ask for help and then okay to offer help without feeling embarrassed.
Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Steven? How do you combat overcoming imposter syndrome when it occurs?
So I was just kind of formulating a 3-step plan in my head, just like what I've done over the years. So I think imposter syndrome is still about filling in knowledge gaps and experience so that you're confident when you see something that you're like, okay, I know this. It's when you don't know it that you get that feeling. The heart of it, the bottom of the iceberg, I'm a big proponent of this, is you got to have projects that you're building that you care about. If you don't have a project you're building that you don't care about, you need to have a serious talk with yourself in the mirror. I'm serious, because Being an engineer means you just love building things, and it's not your secondary priority, it's your priority. Like on Saturday morning, if you don't want to go build something, I don't know. I'm lost there, honestly. You got to have a passion for building things, and again, it's got to be something that you look at as like ice cream. It's just awesome. That will give you a tremendous amount of knowledge, like 70% cure to imposter syndrome. The other 25% is the much harder part, which is when do you do that tedious learning? And something that just recent experience is we always feel this like, when I was like in high school, I had the worst work ethic ever. My parents are in the audience. I was never worried about studying or anything. I was like, oh, I'll just do it later. I never had felt any mental pressure. Now as an adult, it's like, I need to do my to-do list. So that to-do list gets in the way, and then you think you don't have time. But there's usually so much time in the day. Like, you'll finish everything at like 9:30. You'll be like so relaxed, like put on Netflix. Like, hey, for 35 minutes, I'm going to study Docker or like OpenAI. And you will get so much knowledge in that relaxed state versus doing it while you're doing your day job. Your brain will just go crazy. So find these relaxed times to learn. It will compound, right? There's like an hour per day per year. It's like 350 hours of learning. And then the last thing, this is more of a esoteric philosophical thing, is I do think there are problems in how the world works today with respect to how companies expose what job requirements are. This is a very nuanced thing in my life. It relates to my startup, UpskillHero, where I think companies do an absolutely horrible job explaining what you actually need to know on day one. These job descriptions, again, I might get some pushback for this, but I think the JDs are written atrociously. They don't really explain what's really required. They're kind of just like robot-written job requirements. They're not honest. So there's a little bit on the employer as well, and I will say that, was that Bitcoin reference, I'll die on that hill, that these companies need to do a way better job giving the worker a little bit more insight as to what they need to learn. So that's my 3-step process.
Appreciate that. You mentioned about like mentorship and support, and you mentioned about like daily habits that you should have to overcoming your imposter syndrome. Along with personal support, there's also the environment that we work in. Do you think companies and teams have a role in reducing imposter syndrome? What steps can organizations take to create a space where employees feel valued and confident? So Stephen, you have your organization, you have your company. What do you think as a company you can provide help?
I think that relates to the last point that you could say I'm passionate about. It's tough. These companies and these teams, I think startups, well, not necessarily. It really isn't by the size of the organization. You need to be fair to a new person joining your team. You've got to slow down and say, this human being is way disproportionately more important than the work that I'm going to get done today. Because if I train them properly and I onboard them properly, they're going to make my job 30, 40% easier. I think it's more of a cultural thing. Like, there needs to be more onboarding. Like, not hand-holding, but hey, whether you're senior or you're day one coder, this is what the company does. This is how the code base works. This is why we designed it this way. This is what this code does. And a lot of times you don't see that. You get bad product management mixed in. So if you have a team that does onboard you in a respectful way, it will make your life unbelievable, because that actually is what could cause a long-term career growth. I actually find it really weird that if you join a company A on let's say you joined a company on October 1st, you could be out of there on December 1st with the worst experience in your life because they were in a bad part of that week where they couldn't onboard you. Person that joined on October 8th could end up going on a 10-year career in software engineering because of how well they got onboarded that week. And I really think it's that impactful. Best advice I could give, it's all about the team giving that help. If you don't get the help, you got to try to fight for it.
Thank you for that. Chase, you've been working in Flatiron School and JPMorganChase. What kind of resources or support do you think is helpful when you want to overcome the imposter syndrome from like company perspective?
Well, I definitely agree that onboarding is lacking. I think that, you are very much dropped in the deep end, and it's not like, oh, well, trial by fire, but it's not a good way to feel comfortable. It's not a good way to learn an actual code base and the culture of a team. So let's just say you will find yourself in a team already. It does not have good onboarding and you need help. The only thing I'd say is you do need to be vocal. You need to be so vocal because you need to realize it is not getting better. And the more silent you are, the worse it will be, because if you're not staying still, as time goes by, responsibility is going to get more and more intense, and you're going to feel even more and more lost. So be vocal. And again, I mean, I had to go and literally say, you need to tell me this. You need to. And it feels very uncomfortable. I get it. But they are expecting you to do a job, and you deserve that information. It's your right. It is your responsibility to get it. Because unfortunately, as you said, just a lot of companies don't have it. But when the more people hear you asking for help, and the more times, more times you offer help, and this is the part is tricky, because when you already feel behind, it's hard to get in the mindset of looking at what you've actually learned that you could help other people with, but you are learning. You may feel behind, but start to look at the ways that the things that you've actually accomplished and the ways you can help other people. So ask for help, be very vocal, and start to offer help to any new people coming in. And it really, I remember I saw it in our cohorts here at Flatiron. Let's say I think my cohort was like 20, and when I was a coach, 20, 25. All it takes is a couple of people to flip the entire culture of the cohort. Goes from a place where everyone keeps themselves, everyone codes, no one shows their weakness or vulnerability, to a place where the Slack is just blowing up with, I'm lost, I need help, who wants to get on a study session? Before you know it, you have a full-fledged, positive, strong community that you helped create.
Thank you so much. I echo that. We have to advocate for ourselves to get the support that we need. So thank you and for sharing your experiences and strategies. We've covered a lot of ground today, from understanding imposter syndrome to practical way of overcoming it. Now we'd like to open the floor to your questions, if you have any, if you want to share your experience or your strategies as well. So let's keep it real. Yes, let's hear what's on your mind. If anyone have any question or any insights to share with us. Okay, Dan, I'm going to give you the mic.
Yeah, so during my time in Flatiron, almost the very first thing that I did was make a Discord server for everyone in the class that the teacher wasn't a part of. And the thing that was cool about that was people could really go in there and be like, I don't get this at all, and feel comfortable that they're not looking bad in front of the teacher or anything like that. And then we used to hold these like study sessions afterwards where half the class would come in, we'd all get on voice chat, be completely lost, and then just go over the material again. And by the end of that, everyone seemed to know how to do it. And we even went as far as going to the lesson plan ahead, going over it before class, and then going into class with like questions at the ready for the teacher to really like drive home all this knowledge. And I just think that sort of communication is everything, making that safe place to say, I don't know what's going on, you don't know what's going on, here's the reference material, let's figure this thing out. The imposter syndrome will just melt away.
Love that.
Thank you so much.
Thank
It's
you.
just be authentic yourself at work job. If you speak up, someone can relate to you, and you will build the community that Chase mentioned, that you can help each other out. Thank you for sharing that, Dan. Okay, here's.
My question is technically for the gentleman. I'm sorry, I didn't get you. For Steven. You were talking about onboarding and then job requirement, and you were talking about doing like some kind of like onboarding and training, like a week or two. We were talking about, and like how you welcome the employee, and also we talked about how when you just get into an environment, how you feel, and how you like feel this imposter syndrome when you get something new, right? So how do you think this onboarding sometimes can even like implement a bigger imposter syndrome because they are new and then they get into this company and then now first 2 weeks, they're dropping all this thing on them that they don't know anything about. So how do you manage that in terms of understanding what they could feel and not losing that actual like a new hire just because of this kind of like training and like imposing all these details on them?
I guess I got to think about that one. So I think kind of to sum up what you're asking, it's like, what's the most effective way or fair way to run that onboarding process? And correct me if you want me to answer in a different way, but it's a very tough question to answer because these companies they're incentivized to succeed financially and commercially, and that's fine. That's what a for-profit company is. For it to work, you need these companies, unfortunately, to have the right leadership at the top that infuse and enforce that the right onboarding process happens. It's like if the CEO of a company says, look, we're going to onboard companies in this way, we're going to make it fair for them. In a dream world, maybe each employee goes, you know what, I'm ready to start the job now. I feel like I'm adequately trained, I have no more questions. I think that's how it should be, as long as it's not excessive. Maybe it's 2 weeks depending on the industry and how hard it is to catch up. But if you don't have the top leadership doing that, it's tough because this is like a life battle. How are you gonna go in as a brand new person trying to show off that you're a great worker and be like, hey, I don't like your onboarding process, dude. Yeah, that's gonna work really well. It's really on you to I think another way to answer this is you gotta do a better job as a candidate investigating the company. Talk to people that work there. Do they have that onboarding process? If they don't, then stay away from them. If you're getting like mixed opinions, what's always hard about life is you might get an offer. You're like, oh no, I got an offer, this is awesome, but I heard this company sucked. But it's so hard to say no. So maybe when you're not sure, you go in and you say, like, these are my ground rules. I'm not doing X, Y, and Z. A lot of it is also how you carry yourself. Like, it is amazing. This is hard. Like, this is really hard to do. But going into a meeting with like a manager or somebody and saying, look, if you sound more professional, they'll feel it. Like, yeah, I haven't learned this yet. I'm gonna need to be onboarded on this part of the code base. I want you to tell me about this library. I want to understand how this was built. And then I'm gonna move on to this ticket. If you create that kind of backbone through that professionalism, I'm trying to give you the best way to handle it because it's not easy. So yeah, do your research on the company. I wish all companies had CEOs that were like, we're gonna do this super fair, just not part of culture yet on a wide scale. And then kind of back yourself up in like a professional type. It doesn't have to be like tough. It could just be like, just sound like you know what you're doing. That's the best way to answer it.
Okay, do we have time for one more question? Okay, I saw this one first.
So you kind of answered this in the last question, but when you're applying for jobs, let's say you're like full stack developer, when you go from like application to application, they'll have a completely different tech stack depending on the job, of course. And let's say you may be proficient in a couple of them, but maybe they use like a relational database instead, or maybe they may have like a different like language for like the back end, just random things, different like anything. So what would you suggest if like maybe you're like missing a couple things? Is it like still a good idea to like go and apply for that job, or should you only like apply for a job that? Sorry, would you like only like suggest applying for a job that you absolutely are proficient in like everything that they're requiring for the requirements, or is it okay to kind of like come in, maybe you're missing a couple things? Yeah.
I think that's, again, that is a conversation. One, they'll say that on the job post. I mean, they'll say the level of proficiency that they expect. If it's a situation, if it's an entry-level job and you can go in as entry-level of a particular language, or they're going to give you time to ramp up on something, well, then you feel free to jump right in. If it says you should have 5 years of something under your belt and professional experience with it, and you've never done it for a day, it's probably not going to be a good fit. Now, do I know people that have done that? Yes. So, you, of course, yeah. And yeah, so we are, like, people do this and they get by. It really depends on the company. And that is, look at the job post. I mean, I'd say one thing, if it says 1 to 2 years, that can sort of be read sometimes as 0. It really just depends on the company. And a lot of times, especially if it's an algorithm-based or algorithm data structure-based interview, they're not even going to ask about that thing that you're supposed to have the qualifications for. But just be aware, you don't want to be in a situation like where you talk about real imposter syndrome and fake imposter syndrome, where you literally are an imposter pretending that you have 5 years of experience. I mean, theoretically, you want to build up relationships with your coworkers, and any lies you carry into your interview, that's something you actually have to hold on to. Now, there's lying and there's, we'll say, finagling, and so just be aware. You want to find a good fit for you. We're talking about that first job and onboarding. It doesn't matter how good the onboarding is. If you are out applying for a job that is 3 levels above you, then no onboarding is really going to get you to a place that you feel that you can ramp up and feel comfortable. But I would say, don't limit yourself to what you're proficient in now. Definitely look at the jobs, and you can talk to a recruiter too, and you could see, well, are they open to someone with my background and where I'm at?
I have 2 cents from my end. So you can check the tech stack, because if you're really proficient with one programming language, to be honest with you, the other one is not too hard to grasp. You can see if you can learn it a little bit. Maybe that can give you like a big picture of should you apply for it or not. That worked for me. I know nothing about iOS development before I joined the company, so I just have a little bit of like React Native experience. And after joining the company, they gave me a lot of resources to learn, so I learn while I'm working. So it depends on the company and the tech stack, so you should definitely check that out. All right, so.
Yeah, I have one point there because I'm just thinking about my early career. So another way to look at it is like software engineering should be fun. It should be a pleasurable job, and it's like, what's the reason it wouldn't be? Because you're really asking like, what's gonna suck? Like, just not be fun, and I don't know what I'm doing. It's taken me years to figure this out. It's very tough because these job descriptions, again, they're not really written that well, or honestly. What I would give you is my biggest thing to kind of really hone in on, and don't ignore it, is what are they going to put you on day one? What am I working on? What is the project that I'm working on? You're going to be able to understand. Ultimately, you're kind of searching for a headache, which you don't want to be in a headache. And it happens all too often where, okay, we're going to put you on. You're going to start off the first month building some dashboards using React and maybe some new libraries. I mean, that probably sounds fun. Even if you don't know those libraries, you'll learn them. But if you start to hear like confusion in what you're going to be working on, that's when you're going to be put in a scenario accidentally, it's still their fault, where you're learning way too much at the same time. It's like, oh, now you have to learn like 5 different databases, AWS, Docker, because they didn't have the right project for you. Know what project you're working on. That's going to give you a really good signal as to, is this going to be a good fit?
Do we have time for a question, Lisa, or? Okay. All right, seems like we don't have time. Okay. Thank you all for your questions and your thoughts. As we wrap up, I'd like to share a few final thoughts. Imposter syndrome is something many of us face, but it doesn't have to hold us back. As we mentioned, the strategies with the right mindset, with the support and perseverance, we can all navigate these feelings and continue to grow. I hope you're leaving here with a new insights and practical advice to overcome the imposter syndrome. And thank you to our panelists, Steven and Chase. That's really helpful to learn about how to overcome imposter syndrome. And I would like to appreciate Bletchley Institute and Flatiron School to give us this platform to connect with everyone. And I would like to thank all of you for listening to us and for being part of this conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you.